Welcome, Theresa Dedmon. Yay, we did this. Thank you for those of you that hung out today and you're waiting for this 3 o'clock interview. We've had a few technicalities, but we're on here. We made it together. I want to welcome my friend, my teacher and mentor, Theresa Dedmon. From Bethel Church. Theresa is the Director of Creative Arts at Bethel Church and Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, where my husband Rick and I attended from 2009 to 2011. And we were so rocked by all the teachers there, but Theresa rose to the top like cream as far as the teachers there that really activated us, and especially me in my creative gifts, made me move forward in them, gave me courage, made me go out and do this stuff in the streets. You know, it was an amazing experience. And Theresa, I'm forever thankful for that. And it's the things we've done in the last 10 years are largely because of the courage that you gave us. And so I wanted to bring you on today to just give everybody a taste of what you gave us. And Theresa's an author. She's a beautiful artist. She's an encourager, an inspirer, a teacher. She's been around the world with some of these stories that she's going to share with us today. So with that, I'm just going to ask you, Theresa, why do you do what you do? How did you get into all of this?
That's such a great question. First of all, thank you, Christy, for having me on. I know it's been a crazy journey. Oh my gosh, we have so many stories about what happened here in Redding and what's happening in Colorado when I was together with you there, and now you're in Texas. So how did I get going? That is a great question. I think it started when I was probably about 4 or 5, Christine, and I had an open vision with God, and so I saw this tree, and I was waiting for my brothers and sisters to come home from school, and I saw at the topmost branches there was a rustling, and there was like a circular movement around, and then I was looking around and everything else was still, and I knew that God was visiting me. And at that moment, I knew that I would be a teacher for the Lord, and I knew that I would love Him with all my heart. And I never deviated from that, which is so crazy, Christine. So I was on that journey, and because of that, I think I was launched into seeking Him and seeking and understanding who He was. And I remember my mom was an artist. I started to create I started to create before I talked. Like, I was just that kind of a person. So I loved art. I loved expressing myself. I loved musicals. I grew up in a very creative home, and I think that launched me into an understanding of the beauty of creativity in expressing the human heart. And I really, it's so funny. I mean, I always felt like art was such a language of the heart in every aspect of art, in writing, dance, everything. And then I just went to Bible college, felt the heart to do that, got a minor, just worked in psychology, worked in all that kind of stuff, and became really a pastor. And at that time, I was really venturing out into creative expressions in the marketplace. My husband and I, we pastored a church and pioneered a church in Huntington Beach in Southern California. But I never really understood the call until I came here in 2002. And I was sitting in a booth at Bethel, and this one boy who was about maybe 19 or 20, he said, "I see you leading an arts movement, and I see it going around the world." And I go, "Wait, I'm a pastor." I didn't see how the two came together. I didn't see that one was just as significant as the other. And then I had an open vision a couple days later where I saw myself painting. Now, I hadn't really painted since high school, and I saw myself painting in the back of our sanctuary at Bethel, and Bill Johnson, the senior pastor, is preaching, and all of a sudden I was knocking over the easel. Paint was flying everywhere. People were turning around, and I remember in my head saying, "I can't take away from the man of God." So that was really my call, like what happened to Peter when Peter saw the unclean animals. That was a call, and I didn't get it. I did the School of Ministry like you did in first year with my husband Kevin and then my son Chad. And then the next year I was asked by Chris Valentin to head up all the creative arts. And then I was also asked to head up the second year School of Ministry. So I found myself planted in those two arenas. And as I did that, I began to marry the prophetic and healing into what was happening with creativity, both in the marketplace, like you know, and also in the church life. And I just saw miracles. I saw healing through creativity. I saw the prophetic blessing people through creativity. And so that began my journey of then speaking in churches, which really launched me into, in around the same time you were there, writing my book Born to Create, and my
Yes.
Cultivating Kingdom Creativity.
Yeah.
And then launching me into what I do right now is traveling around the world and really inspiring people to be creative and to know their calling as a creative.
I love that. I love that so much. And so often, we as those part of the creative group that's writers somehow doesn't, sometimes we don't always see ourselves as an artist, but we are artists.
Oh,
And
yeah.
everything that you teach, everything you say applies to the whole realm, doesn't it? Talk a little bit. I love what you said about marrying the art and the writing and, the other things that you're doing, even music and healing and other ministry.
Yeah.
Even in the streets, like how does that work and how might that look for a writer?
That's a great question. First of all, I believe, and I know I'm speaking to all you out there, I believe that writing has such a powerful message of getting to the heart. And so for me, a backstory is like when I was in high school, I had won some contest for the Robert Frost contest, which is it's a poetry contest that was nationwide. So my English teacher said, Theresa, you have such an incredible musical ability. You should potentially do this. And so I really wasn't even thinking about this, but I just said, okay, I will. So I wrote 2 poems and they won. And so in my senior year, I took a creative writing class. And in this creative writing class, people got to know me as a writer. And this one friend said, hey, could you write a poem for me? It's from my English class. I know that you loved poems. And I was in my history class. And I remember being so well, sure, because I wanted to be popular, right? So I wrote this for her. Being a Christian, I wrote this for her. I gave it to her. She turned it in as her poem. And then about 3 months later, they had this Robert Frost contest again. And so I took the bare bones of this poem and I restructured it and I turned it in. So my teacher the following week said, somebody here plagiarized. I can't believe it. Somebody in class plagiarized. And she talked the whole entire time about it. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's terrible. That is what the heck? What happened?
Yeah.
Right? Not knowing it was me. And so then my friend rushed in to talk to me after that class and said, Theresa, my teacher loved the poem that you had written for me, that she turned it into this Robert Frost contest. So then I knew it was me. So I went and I had to talk to this teacher, it's me. I felt like I had a black little, line on my face, it's me. Yeah. And she just really shamed me. I mean, she really let into me. How could I do that? And here I was, this staunch Christian, ethical, and I felt I couldn't even look at her after that, in the face. And I completely shut off poetry. So I didn't do poetry until about 2 or 3 years ago. And it was really because of my art and poetry that I write together. And the Lord spoke to me and said, you need to redo this. So I'm coming up, and it should be out in a couple of months, an art and poetry book.
I love that. That's awesome. Congratulations. Yes.
Yeah. So that story is all about the fact that, the dogs of doom crouch at the door of destiny, the things that the enemy doesn't want you to do what you're called to do. And so he's going to create smoke screens in your life about things that have happened in the past that prevent you from seeing yourself the way God sees you. Yeah. And so for me, that was a huge, I would say, a huge breakthrough, because I really hadn't associated that with why I didn't take my poetry seriously. But it really was because of that teacher. Now, again, I forgave her, but I didn't realize that I tuned out my gift
Yes.
because of that. So yeah.
Something similar happened to me when I was in college. I was applying for journalism school at University of Missouri, and I had to go to an interview with the dean of students, who was an older woman and extremely scary. And I was a shy young student, young girl. I remember my hippie clothes and my long braids and going in and talking to her.
Yeah.
And she scared me. Like everything I said to her, she would put down. And I
Yeah.
thought, I am never going to get into this school. And I was so scared. And I feel like I never even thought about it until you just told your story, how
Yeah.
often the enemy can come against us through other people's voices and discourage us, because it took me, I still remember, it took me a long time to deal with that and be brave enough to step into my gift and to go for it. I did get into this school, but boy, I just thought as a teacher, that was, to me, that's not the way to be a teacher. I know that sometimes in those days, we were taught to be tough as women, right? So not vulnerable, and not knowing that vulnerability really is a strength. It's a huge strength, way more, it speaks way louder than toughness, right? So
It does. It
yeah.
really does. And I think that that's the part that I have learned, that I think that as writers, as all of you out there are writers, like part of that journey is that that the best writing is vulnerability. And that's what my poetry book is all about. But it's interesting. I remember when I wrote my book, Born to Create, I was among a lot of giants. I mean, Bethel was just starting to grow as a writer hub, and Bill had launched his book, When Heaven Invades Earth. He had launched Dreaming with God, some other books as well. Chris had written The Supernatural Ways of Royalty and some other books. And Kevin my husband had just launched The Ultimate Treasure Hunt. So I remember thinking of these moguls going, God, you want me to write my story? Like, wait a second. And I really, I mean, as a writer, I really had to battle, and I couldn't say I'm a writer. I had to say that like over and over again. And it was the kind of thing where what I had to do as a writer, I just had to do it. So part of my process for all of you out there is, whatever you're afraid of, the only way to face that is to do it. Like, there's no other way that you can do it but to actually face that, and then to go ahead and then to do it.
That's so good. I love that. I love your book, Cultivating Kingdom Creativity. I've read all your books, by the way, but
Yeah.
I think that was your first one, and mine is tattered and torn, and the pages are falling out.
I know. We revisited that. We have a new cover, but the Cultivating Kingdom Creativity is a great book because it launches you into the different ways that you can launch into all the creative ways and see them merge together. Both, and there's so many testimonies, as you know, in that book, and activations that help you to grow. I think that Chris, there's something that we have and I want people to know this, like, this is so important, is like, we have the Creator God. He's living inside of us, Christ in us, the hope of glory. He's creative. He's called us to be, and he wants us to go after our dreams, part of his nature. But a lot of us look at what we're called to be, and we have this professional, like, perfectionistic mindset that actually makes us fear the very gift we have, because we think it has to be a certain standard. And so we don't understand, like, no, you start here and you grow, and that should be very, I think, praiseworthy. And that part, you cannot get to this part without this part. And so a lot of people, they don't ever go into the stream because they think they have to be here before they venture out. And I just want to tell people, like, part of the process that I found in my writing and my poetry was just people talking about my art and say, oh my gosh, that poem that you did for that art is amazing. And it's just those little things of getting it out that caused me to realize, oh, this is really touching people, and this is really ministering to people. And so it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to write my book in a year. It could be little snippets of stuff that you're doing and just putting on social media or giving out, that's going to transform people.
Yeah, that's so good. You've really modeled that so well. I mean, even in all of your social media and your books too. But I just, the Cultivating Creativity, and then Born to Create. I love that book too. I mean, they're very different, but they have some of the same material. There you go. Yes, I love them.
Yeah,
And
this is a different book. It's a book
okay.
about my story. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have taught from both of those books, so thank you for giving me teaching material. But I love to have groups where I raise them up and try to activate, empower them, and help them to understand they can do what they're called to do.
Yeah.
So
I just launched an e-course called Created to Overcome, which you can get at teresadedmon.com. And what I did is when I launched that, I realized, Tracy, that Chris, that most people don't ever complete something because of perfectionism, fear of failure, rejection, and shame. And so I dived into that, and I really helped them to understand the creative process about what every artist, whether they're a dancer, a writer, into anything, has to go through of facing that, and then how to overcome that. And so I really give them practical steps on how to do that, because I'm like you. It's like, I don't want people to live in fear and never fulfill their creative destiny, and then get to the end of their life and go, oh my gosh, I always wanted to write this children's book, but I never believed in myself, or I never had the courage to do that. It's like, you have to try. You have to get that out there, because as you take a step forward, God will meet you.
yes,
And he'll help you with that.
yeah, it's a partnership. It's so much a partnership, because we're created in his image. He loves to be with us and create with us. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Theresa, can you give us some testimonies from your experience and your travels and your teaching of your students of some things that made a difference, that were world changing, nation changing, as far as art or writing or
Absolutely.
music or whatever you carry? Yes.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I think that part of the journey is, it's a crazy journey that we're on, and we're all connected. And I think what we're taught when I share these testimonies, it's like this one testimony, you can be a part of someone's testimony, or you can take this testimony and then ask God to do it again in your life. So I'll give you an example of Melody Wang. So Melody Wang was a student that became my intern about 3 years ago, and she was from the Bay Area and had a church that ministered a lot in Taiwan and in a lot of the Asian countries. So she came to Reading, and I heard her story, gosh, when she was in my internship. So when she was about 8 years old, her mother was a piano teacher. And so she, of course, was taking piano lessons, right? And so she was like the teacher. So her father took her to the recital that she was in, and she just messed it all up. And so on the way home, he again, this is an Asian culture. He's just chastising her. How could you do that? You know, you represent your mom, this and that, didn't you study? Didn't you practice? And after that, she never, ever played, and she never, ever sang. So all of her musical like desires just fell. And so when she was 13, they really got into a spirit-filled church as well. And he had this dream where he saw himself, and as he was opening up his mouth, all these bees were coming out, and they were stinging people. And he thought, well, that's bizarre. So he woke up his wife. What is that? And
oh, wow.
So she said, well, ask God what that means. So he realized that his words had cursed his daughter. So he woke her up in the middle of the night. He said, I am so sorry, Melody, for what I said to you. I apologize. Would you please forgive me? And there was a reconciliation that happened. And so the next day he comes home from work, and he hears this beautiful piano playing, and it's Melody. And so everything got restored. So then she comes to the School of Ministry. She's probably about 19 at the time, or 20. And she's hearing me speak. And so she writes a song called We Are the Reformers. And she sends it to me. Now, I don't know Melody. She's just a student. You know how large the student body is now. And so I listened to her going, oh my gosh, I mean, she had everything down. She had recorded it so well. And I said, this is amazing. And I began to really disciple her. And So what happened is like she now is at IHOP. She's a recording artist, and she goes to Taiwan and she ministers. So she took this song that she had written about We're the Reformers. She last summer she brought it to Taiwan, and she was at it was at a convention for teachers, and they nominated that as the song that they would have for years to come, that they would be playing about that they are the reformers for all of Asia. Now you guys have to realize, like, what the heck? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like Jesus, like, it's just so crazy how our lives are interwoven together. And, you know, I've ministered in Taiwan many times, but that to me is such a story of what God can do through our lives if we just say yes, and if we choose to disciple and bless people. There's so many stories. Like a great story would be I was in South Africa. I know you guys all love South Africa. And I was ministering there, and I was teaching on the power of creativity and the power of writing and art and everything else. And so it was at a church in Johannesburg. And so I didn't know who was there, but there were teachers there. And so these teachers went back to where they lived, which was in this, it's like a town where there's a big game reserve where a lot of the big hunters that have the Fortune 500 companies go to game hunt. And so what she decided to do from the testimony, she decided to teach the children how to do prophetic art with writing. And so she would make up these cards, and then she would put them in the hotel room where these Fortune 500 people were staying. They would read these cards and they would see the art. They would contact the school, and the whole school was funded because of this. And it was all
Who
because
would have known?
of prophetic art and writing. And I just have to sit there and go, what the heck? Jesus, like, I mean, just the little act of obedience of going there has transformed that school that was very poor, that didn't have the ability to do what it wanted to do, because of the children's prophetic art and writing. It's just like, it's crazy what God can do if we just allow him into what we're doing. This one time I was teaching here at Bethel, and there was a couple from Switzerland that I'm very connected to, and they have a great church in Aarau. And so she was saying, Theresa, could you just pray for me? I feel like I feel like you have a word for me. So I just said a word. I said, I feel like you're supposed to write a children's book, and I feel like it's really going to change Switzerland. And I just gave her a word like that. And so we went there the following year and ministered at that church. And she goes, here's my book that you prophesied over. And and then she goes, and here I recorded music for it. And I did all the illustrations for it. And I'm going, what the heck? Like, what? You're doing so much. So it's one of those things where I look at that and I go, Lord, you know, that people need permission. So people need permission to create, but also to see the supernatural connection. Now, what I'm saying by that is, like, God has a timetable. He has things that he wants to do in and through all of our lives. But God also has called the prophetic, and he's called in certain people to speak at the right moment into our destiny to cause us to see a greater harvest than what we would normally see. And so I think that's one of my destinies. And I think when that one young man spoke over my life in 2002 about an arts renaissance, that these people are wanting it, but they just haven't been given permission to do it. Or like you, they haven't been given, in a sense, disciples or people that can mentor them into that process.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I'm thinking of other stories that you've told too. The one about when we were in school, a woman looking at a painting of yours, and she got totally healed of a brain tumor. And another one of a friend of mine that did a mural in a prison in South Africa.
Yes.
And the men and women that were in the prison just felt freedom.
Kimberly, right? Yeah, they got saved, and she went back the following year and worked with Tracy Evans and did 4 or 5 other murals in other prisons because, you know, it's like how many people know, like, pictures and writing, it takes you into a place of encounters with God.
Yeah,
And so this is part of our destiny. This is part
that's
of what we're
good.
called to. Yes.
That's so good. So I feel like anything you're saying about art or music applies to the writing as well. It's like when we write our stories, when we even just tell the stories of God's testimony in our own lives, in our own words, in our own style, we don't have to copy anybody else's style, but just conversationally share it. God has a purpose for that, and it's going to get to its target, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you say that because, like, you know, Chris, you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that wrote from, they were with Jesus the same amount of time, but they wrote different perspectives because their message was different people. And I just want to encourage the writers out there, like, know your audience, know the people that you're called to reach, know what they need, and then begin to tell stories that they could relate to. Because when you talk to a child, that's going to be a totally different type of scenario than when if you're talking to a teenager, then you're talking to an adult or a woman or a man or a church versus a person who's not saved. There's so many different audiences. So when people think that one size fits all, that's not the case. We need to understand who we're really called to, because that will be related to how well they receive it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Well, because I was thinking about my people.
Yeah.
I gather writers and I gather other creative people and other people that just need encouragement about identity and about the love of God. And I'm just also thinking of them as an audience now, like for you, what are their biggest needs? And you've addressed a little bit of this, but maybe we can talk about it a little bit more. I know that they have a fear of getting started. They have a fear of completion. They think they're not good enough, or they're not the authority in that area. They have this big desire to write, which I believe is compelled by God, but don't know where to start exactly. That's where I come in. I'm a writing coach, and so I can help them and guide their way. And you can take classes, and there's a whole lot of resource out there. But sometimes it's just about getting started. And you've mentioned that, but can you talk a little bit more about some of the barriers, the giants that happen in people's lives and in your life too, as you're even moving forward? I mean, we continue to learn, don't we? We continue to cast our vision forward.
That's right. I mean, here you are on Zoom. Even though we're not together, we are together, right? That's the beauty of technology, but it's the beauty of knowing how to really touch people in a way that can really happen. So I would love to address that. First of all, in the process of getting started, the first thing is realizing that you have to know your identity. So like, for instance, like, I just finished the course Created to Overcome, the e-course, and we just did a subscription, which, please, like, if you guys can do this, I would love to have you join. But it's a subscription where it's only $14.99 per month, where they get all of my e-courses, they get all of my future e-courses, and they get my webinar, and they have access to all of that. So Created to Overcome was my last e-course that I created on shame, fear, the other ones. But what we did is we launched something which you could see, where after we had about 80 people participate that first round. And so I would coach them for an hour after they went through the first segment, whether it was rejection or shame, whatever. And then they would have a moment to respond. So it was crazy, because this one person responded and said, she was just really crying and she was very moved. And she goes, I've never shared any writing ever with anyone. And so she's like, her paper is shaking, and this is a poem that God said to her, and she starts to read it. And I mean, there wasn't a dry eye with those 60 or 70 people that were on the call and the Zoom call. And it was like, so that she had permission to be powerful for that moment. That 5 minutes was her breakthrough moment. And that, I think, is very, very key. If I don't have someone who believes in me, it's very hard for me to start. So part of what I would want for your listeners and your writers to know, like, have people that are for you. Have your like the Anne of Green Gables, those people that are going to go, you can do this. Yes. Have those people that love you and that they're not going to critique you. They're just going to love you. Start with that. And then start to share a little bit about your creativity. Why is that important? Because creativity is the most vulnerable thing we can do. Like, if I was going to break out into a song, most people, that's their number one fear, is to sing in public or to like be a speaker in public or whatever it is. And so this is because that's so vulnerable, because that's part of who I am. So part of that is allowing God to love that part inside of you. So by that, I mean, I have to be able to say to myself, Jesus, what do you think about my writing? And I have to be able to hear him say, I love it when you write. I have to know that Jesus is for me and that he's not critical. If I don't know that, I will continually beat myself up of having it not be perfect. Now, if I have that buffer of Jesus who adores me and adores how he created me and wants me to create, if I have people that are my cheerleaders, if I have those two things, then the next thing to start is to get a goal. I'm going to write for 15 minutes a day, whatever it is, but to have that goal so that you really do like work on it. Like I have my team do a 40-day challenge, which is such a great exercise.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And so what we do is we say, okay, figure out how long you want to do it, but decide on whatever creative medium you want and do something for 40 days. And it's a challenge and we all participate in it. So that really helps to get stuff going and for people to start. So I would say get a goal, let Jesus love you, and find your cheerleaders.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to say that you are a cheerleader.
Yes,
you are just the biggest cheerleader and activator and motivator. And so, yeah, you're, and I want to tell my writers too, that find people like that in your life. You don't need to join a writers group that's a big critique group. I don't endorse those necessarily. I mean, they can be helpful if you're really trying to become a better writer and you have thick skin, but find a group that has a lot of love and really encourages and cheerleads. And
I agree with you 100%. I think like with anything, people grow the most with encouragement. People do not grow if they're afraid. It's just a part of how we are in our identity. Now, like you said, if I'm motivated to grow in a skill and have feedback, that happens way after I've built up my connection with Jesus and with others, knowing I have confidence. So it's kind of that progression that needs to happen, because you don't that in Colorado, you don't plant a tree that can bend with the wind without putting stakes around it, or else it's going to flop over. And it's right.
Well, and it's hard when you write something or you paint something and somebody comes along with a cross word about it. It's just like, we see that on Facebook all the time. It's just like, oh my gosh, how can we get more brave when that happens? But I think you have to again, know your audience, know who you're writing for, know God and what he's asked you to do, and bless those people that are critics too, because you're still planting seeds through what you're doing.
Yeah, I love Brene Brown. She talks about, if they're not in the arena with me, then I'm not going to listen to them. So
I like that.
Yeah, if the people are that I'm allowing to like move me are not in themselves being vulnerable, I'm not going to like listen to that. So that's an important thing to know. Like they have to be willing to see your heart when they speak. You've
already given me some great ideas to implement when we get off the phone here. So this is going to be good. Yay! This is good. So cast your vision a little bit. What is ahead for you, Theresa? And how are you navigating your business with all of a sudden everything changed with the school and everything, your travel?
I mean, we're even hearing, is there going to be a school like next year? Is it going to be through Zoom? Is it going to be, I mean, we have so many different things that are challenges that await I think every educational institution in America is wondering the same thing. Every elementary,
Yeah.
high school, college level, as far as numbers, as far as everything about social distancing, there's so much that's going on. And then, of course, my travel, which I love to do, as you know. So for me, I had to do a pivot. So everybody out there, I want you to know that God is in a pivot right now. He's resetting what we're doing in every dimension of our life. And if we're not careful, we can move into, well, I guess I just can't do that. What we can move into a lot of hope deferred.
Mhm.
And so for me, what I had to do is I had to make a pivot. I had to, as you know, I had to start to prophesy on social media. I had to call pastors and say, hey, would you like a Zoom conference if I can't get there? All these different things that like are happening right now are creating something to where the positives are, number one, wow, if I do a Zoom creative conference, I'm going to reach a lot more people that
Yeah.
can't necessarily be in a general location. So that is a plus. But there's also the problem that a lot of people aren't that savvy with that. So there's lots of different things that you have to navigate, but you have to kind of, as a prophetic seer, you have to look into where we're going in the future. And so for that has been an interesting pivot for me. So for me in the future, that's why I did the subscription, because I felt, Christy, like Chris, I felt like there are people that right now are the writers that are with you, that they might not ever get to my creative conference, but they could get to that, Creative to Overcome Defeating Mindsets and get set free, or they could go and do Create to Be Free and get some inner healing. They could do the Create 28 and have 28 sessions to unlock your creativity. There's things that we can do on an online platform that I couldn't do by just going to all these different places. So I think our future is one on building creative networks.
You see a bright future through all of this.
I absolutely do. And I feel like I see a needed future. One of the things that I'm doing right now, Christy, for the next years, I'm seeing, like, which you're going to love. I'm seeing, like, so with the subscription, they go through my courses and then they get a certificate after that round of all the courses. And then we're moving into doing one for small groups. So I have a heart for community. So I feel like that's huge. Like what you're building right now in a community, that's the people that I want to reach, are the people that want to do that, because I believe that's the future.
Yeah.
And then,
go ahead.
No,
We're going to post all of your links. So I'll post them with this video on the Facebook group page, so you know how to connect with Theresa as well. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, to me, so for me, if I'm looking at the future will be what we're doing right now. The future will be you getting together where you're at, in maybe in a small group or on Zoom, connecting with writers around the world and really growing and seeing what God can do. Because in this moment in time, we have a very strange narrative. And the narrative is to destroy our country. The narrative is to destroy our history in so many different ways. And so for us, this is our time. I mean, you look at what Harriet Beecher Stowe did as a writer to change
that's good.
what happened with the Civil War. I mean, you see what happened with, oh my gosh, Amazing Grace, and that incredible song that John Newton did that really impacted all that happened with Wilberforce and what he was doing in breaking off slavery through his rhetoric, through his writing in England. I mean, you look at the power of what can happen. We have to give people a better perspective, and to do that, we have to realize that God knows more than we know, and He has a better plan. And so we need to start writing it, and especially testimonies like of what God's doing right now, to that can break off that spirit of just like oh, I don't want to turn on the news because it's going to be another like horrific thing. And so we
Yeah.
need to be aware of that, and we need to be able to raise up the creatives that tell a better narrative.
You know, I was thinking, I know we were being asked to avoid the news and avoid social media by some people that we listen to. And I was thinking about that because I know I need to. I know that it can really get to me if I'm there too much. But also, I believe the media and the social media need our presence. They need our prayer. They need our seeds that we can plant, and however we can do that. So I don't know, it's just a strange time, but I believe that we're being raised up. Our generation is being raised up to, and we've got what it takes, those of us that have been with the Lord, that want to hear what he says and do what he says. And we have what it takes to step forward and be brave and speak our heart and speak what he's saying through us, and love through that too.
Yeah, I think that when I look at scripture, when I look at Jesus, he was not passive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he really spoke against the Pharisees and the Sadducees who were bringing the people into bondage and into fear, into like a place where they were afraid of making a mistake. So I believe that Jesus is perfect theology. So for me, I think that Jesus is he was moved by compassion, and that compassion led him into some really scary places, and it led him to touch the woman at the well. It led him into places where most Jews would never ever go. And so for us, I think the key thing for everybody that's listening, that's a writer, is like, you have to realize like Jesus will always bring about eternal fruit through what you create. And you have to be willing to share your heart. And I think that's where a lot of people are afraid, because in our climate right now, there's so much garbage about being politically correct that people now are being afraid of offending, and Jesus wasn't afraid of that. And so I think that we have to be strong enough in who God's created us to be be like David, to confront any Goliath that we see, and to take that down. And the pen is greater than the sword, right?
That's right. And we need to remember too that Jesus goes with us. So as our words and as we walk forward and into situations, we don't need to fear. He's with us. Just so we're going with him as he's meeting the lady at the well, as he's, as he's speaking to the multitudes, as he's breaking bread and multiplying food. I mean, he carried that awesome power.
Yeah.
But as believers, we carry that because he is with us.
Yeah.
He carried that with us. So we need to trust that. Trust that. I need to hear that myself. I'm listening to my words here to move forward safely.
I think right now in our culture, one of the enemy strategies will always be throughout the culture is to silence the voice of God. I mean, it's from Genesis all the way up, is to silence the voice of God and to have fear be what people like. That's what controls people. That it will always be that way. Because they're still evil. They're still evil to really to break off. And so for us, part of, and this, I'm just going to prophesy right now, but part of the issue is like we're trying to fight with the same weapons, and the church is different now. It's not meeting in like a large facility, and so our weapons are mighty for the pulling down of strongholds, like we read in Ephesians. And so we need to figure out how to use the weapons of spiritual warfare, not to like fight the second heaven, but to bring the third heaven, the presence of God, down into the fabric of what people believe. Now, I just want to say to the writers out there, do you realize what kids are going through right now? I mean, do you realize what parents are going through? Because dang, they have to work and take care of their kids if there's no school. there's major things that writers can get behind to help with parents, to help with the situation of, do you realize how many elderly people are afraid to go to the doctor because they're afraid that they're going to get the COVID, or that something's going to
Yeah.
happen? I mean, we
So
could
much
go
fear.
on as far
Yeah.
as, you know, where the fear is planted. And it's like, but God is love. He's perfect love. And maybe your post is going to touch a woman who is dying in the hospital. Maybe, I mean, there's so many different scenarios that God's going to save, but the writers arose for such a time as this. But I had a prophetic word for you guys.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah, I had this painting that I did, and it's called Legacy. And I mean, sorry, this is called Harvest. And this is about you as a group of writers looking at the harvest. And you know, it's that little small patch of green that's up here in this painting. It's like that harvest, that she's looking at everything that's been sown in the past. And this is all of the writers that have come, like, be just with you, that you're seeing. But all that green is the stuff that God wants you to venture out into. And he wants you to find that harvest. He wants you to grow. And he wants you to see who you truly are. And so this is for you. And then I did this other painting that I wanted to show you at the School of Creativity we just had. And it's called Legacy. And this is the legacy that you have by being with, like, Chris, by being, in a sense, the legacy of your own journey, of your own writing. And this is the poem that goes along with it. That's called Legacy Dwellers. One day we will gather around the tree and hear the stories of God's legacy, where men and women became giants on their knees and raised up mighty warriors to fight for love and unity. Begin that pilgrimage now and live with eternity in sight. It's here. Your legacy begins now. And so I felt like there were people there that, like, they're thinking, well, what can I really do? I'm this person who lives in this little town, and what can I do? And how? And the Lord said, no, you're part of something so much greater. You're part of a legacy. You're part of God's inheritance. And one little leaf that's on that tree could bring healing to a person that could be the next Billy Graham, or the next, like, you know, whoever that you have a heart for. That's part of what we're doing. It's like this thing that I know that, you know, it's like our legacy is huge, but we have to be able to share it. So I want to encourage those that are out there that just seem like that what they do doesn't matter. And I break off that lie in Jesus' name. Yeah. I break off the fear that somehow you're insignificant. And I ask, Father God, that you would show them their significance. You would show them that, God, what they do is going to create dividends. It's going to, like, create people and see things shift and change for culture. The other thing that's very important that I felt today when I was praying for you guys is there was a Dove commercial. I don't know, it was a couple years back. But in it, this man who's an artist, he's doing portraits. And so what he does is he doesn't ever look at the person, and he says, describe who you are. And so he's there and he goes, well, my chin is like this, whatever. So these women are describing what they look like. And before they jump into that, they're in another room with one other woman. And so they're talking for 15 minutes before they come in. And so they have the other woman who doesn't know the other person except for those 15 minutes come in and describe the person that they just saw. So they have one portrait that this artist does from the perspective of how that person sees themselves. But then they have a total stranger who has just spent 15 minutes with them describe what they look like. And then at the end, they did the reveal. And every single portrait about what they thought that they looked like was very different and very much more negative than the way that that total stranger saw them. Now, what they also saw in this stuff, what Dove also discovered, is that the way that a parent models how they see themselves is passed down to their child. So that's why legacy is so important. So if you take a risk wherever you are and you create and you write, your children, your grandchildren will benefit from that. I think of the shack and just the story of why Paul Young wrote that to impact his kids. It's just like monumental. And so it's not, you're just not creating it for people that you won't see, but they're watching your life and they're seeing it and they have, God, yeah, my grandma wrote that children's book. Yeah, my granddad did this. Yeah, you're leaving a legacy behind because that's part of why we're here. We're here to leave a legacy behind. So I
Oh,
want to leave that with you. Yes.
that's so good. Thank you for that. I was hoping you would. I feel like you gave us a Braveheart charge. Like, oh,
Freedom.
freedom to write, and we have permission to write, and we can take a step forward. We can be brave. We can know that God is with us, and we can know that Theresa Dedmon is cheering for us.
Yeah, I'm right here
And
with
Tracy.
yes, I did this picture, and this is like, I feel like this is a print that I did, and it's of a feather, and it's Jesus in me, Jesus who became like us, that's the brown, yet endowed as God, that's the blue, pouring out his life for us, writing the story of the Father's love, that's the quill. May our connection with the divine in weakness of our frailty tell his story. So your story is not just about you. Yeah, everything's great, everything's rosy. No, it's in your weakness of, okay, God, I'm really scared, but I'm going to write. It's in those moments that you're like Jesus.
Yeah.
So again, this is on truthofdedmon.com as well. So you can look at the prints there if you want them. But yeah, I think that's important that you know, Chris, part of my heart is, and I know that you know this, part of my heart is that you have to realize, like, because God's helped me to overcome so much in my life, and because of my story being in high school, like I shared with you about my own journey in writing and in poetry, I have to tell you, it's like, for me, one of my favorite things to do is to pick up an author and read. I love it. I mean, I'm going on vacation next week, and I'm thinking about, well, what book do I want to write? Do I want to read? What do I want? That power is so profound of taking people into a different space. Let me tell you, people need to be taken into a different space during this time. And what you are creating right now is going to transform them, because they're just hearing the negativity. Like, they're thinking, is this ever gonna end? and they need to be transported into a place of hope and healing and a great testimony, etc. So whatever you do on social media, whatever you do in writing, know by posting those things, by getting it out, you could transform someone that is so down, so depressed, so alone, and you could change their life.
And by you too, stepping out and doing what scares you, you're a model for your children. You're a model for your friends. If you can do it, they can do it. So, you know, if not you, who? And not now, when? Like, this is the day, this is the time, this is the season. And I know that there's been lots of teaching and talk about a new renaissance, a new awakening. I think it might be called something different, but it will be similar to what happened 500 years ago, right?
I think so too. Yeah.
Part of that, we're all caught up in something that's happened in history.
Let's just put it this way, guys, and I know you're all, wouldn't it be great if the body of Christ all started to create in the way that they're called to be?
Mm-hmm.
If they took scripture and they just didn't listen to a sermon, but they took it and they go, oh, what does that mean to me personally? What does that mean? What if the whole body of Christ started to be the tellers and be the preachers through creativity? What would happen to our children? Would they want to go to church? Oh yeah, man, I want to receive a writing piece. Oh yeah, I want to receive an art piece. Oh yeah, I want to do this. I mean, our kids are dying to know God, but they just think God is boring because the church has been boring. And so we need to like let them begin to see us as creative and getting excited about what we create. So part of that too, Chris, is like, and I'm just going to say it one more time. If you are afraid to be creative, you are modeling that to your kids and your grandchildren, and they will be as scared to
Yes.
create.
Yeah.
So the more that you get excited and that you let God in, you just have, maybe it's 15 minutes. This is nothing. It's have 15 minutes of just doodling with Jesus, or creating just a free flow of writing. It's like letting God love that part in you. It's just as important as the perfect paragraph.
That's good. And isn't it a joy to create? I mean, even if it never goes anywhere, just the healing that it brings to our spirit, putting paper, paint to a canvas, there's something so special about what we pour into that, a different space that we live in that doesn't let the bad news penetrate, because we are creating. And
yeah, come on.
yeah, so I want to, well, what do you think, everybody? Don't you just love Theresa? Give her some love. If there's some hearts in there, do that. Thank you so much. I want to honor your time. We're coming down to the end. I want everybody to realize that they can connect with you, and we'll put the contact information for your store and for your ministry.
Yes.
Theresa, and I just thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you, and I'm so glad that you're doing well, and I'm so glad that you're continuing to raise up creatives. That's really what you're called to, and so it's my honor to be with you. And again, guys, check out theresadedmon.com, my monthly subscription where you can get everything. Check out the prints if you like those, the poems that are in the back, that might help you too. And my poetry book, I'll let you know when that comes out, so that people can get that too.
Would you post one of your poems or send one to me that I can put with your video here on this Facebook page?
Sure.
Do you have one?
You mean you want a poem?
One of the poems from your book. Yeah, that would be fun to post there, so people can see what it's going to be like.
Okay. Should I just send it to you via text? How should I do that?
Just text it to me, and I'll put it on when we put the recording of this Facebook page up.
Okay.
So
I will definitely do that. I'll do that with one of my art pieces. Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, bless you, Theresa. Thank you. I love you and
Love you
everybody
too.
there in Reading. And we'd say hi to everybody, and
Definitely.
hi to Kevin. And we just are so thankful. We want to see you here in Colorado and Texas too, though I'm still involved in both states. So I don't know if we can put some things together, or maybe it'll be all online. I don't know.
I would love that. We need to do that. I mean, hopefully that the restrictions will be broken and I can come
I hope
on
so.
But yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, bless you. Have a great day, and we'll see everybody at Summer Festival for Writers. Next week, we have PJ Clark, who just finished her book on the art and soul of journaling. You know PJ, Theresa.
So yes, I do. She's amazing.
Yeah, she ministered with us with you, and when you came out to Aspen and Carbondale and Woodland Park. So yeah, really fun. PJ just carries such an anointing for journaling and communing with God through writing. So it'll give you kind of a different viewpoint of why we write. So tune in next Thursday, and we have more interviews coming up further in the summer, and we're just so glad that you're joining us. All right. Bless you, Theresa. We'll see you all.
See you later.
All right. Bye-bye.